welcome everyone. I'll get us kicked off. So I'm Sharon Bly and I lead Healthier Lives here at the Consumer Goods Forum. This is the seventh learning series in our Healthy and More Sustainable Diets session that we kicked off at the start of the year. So I am in very good company, as you can see here on your screen. So just a really, really warm welcome. Joining us from all corners of the globe actually today. So Paul for staying up late in Australia, Sophie for getting up early in Colorado, and Dorothy on the same time zone as me here in Europe. So a warm welcome to all of you, and I'm really looking forward to this. And I know that everyone who's listening live or who will be listening to the recording will get great insights from today's session. So just before going into the details and the content, I just want to give you some housekeeping, of course, and then some context on how this all fits together under the Consumer Goods Forum. So, of course, we would love to have Q&A and to have interaction with today's speakers. You're all very familiar with how to do this. So either in the chat or in the Q&A bar at the top or bottom of your screen. There's no right or wrong question, and I'm sure that Dorothy, Sophie, and Paul will be happy to reply to any of your questions. So please do think of them as we're going through the content today, and we'd be happy to follow up live or follow up by email. So where did this all start? As I mentioned, I lead the work on collaboration for healthier lives, and the Healthier and More Sustainable Diets work stream was born in the Collaboration for Healthier Lives Coalition of Action, where we've seen from multiple markets on the ground this merger between healthier and more sustainable diets, and we wanted to really get behind that as the Consumer Goods Forum, and we brought together what are the critical elements of healthier and more sustainable diets, and of course building on the work of the FAO and the WHO. And this is what we came and what we want to stand behind in our work going forward. Of course, we want to support balanced and diverse food consumption with appropriate nutrient and calorie intake. We wanted to look at diets that have lower environmental pressure and impact, and of course that they're accessible, affordable, equitable, and delicious for all people wherever you live around the planet. We came together as a group around 5 priority areas, and our learning series this year has actually followed these priority areas, but this is as a global group. We really felt we wanted to make impact on having more plants on the plate, empowering consumer choice in this space, and there was a big focus on environmental labeling, the role that plays, better for you and the planet, dairy and meat, right sizing consumption, whether that's under consumption of certain nutrients or overconsumption of others, and then how we bring health and food waste together. And we have an entire coalition actually working on food waste at the Consumer Goods Forum. We wanted to see how we could bring the consumer-facing piece to that work. As I mentioned, this series has been running since the beginning of the year. All of the sessions are recorded. Today's session is being recorded as well. So if you are listening to this during a recording, don't hesitate to look back on the library, and we'll be sharing out next month the recap of everything that we've covered over the past year. So with that, what I would like to do is very much hand it over now in this order of sequence, Sophie, then Dorothy, and Paul. We're going to look at the trends that we're seeing in this space around future foods, what that looks like at Unilever, how that's been implemented, and then Paul will bring us through some of the movements and things that are happening with the chefs community, and of course how this all adds up towards better impact around the Sustainable Development Goals. So think of your questions. We're with each other for the next hour, and really looking forward to this session. So Sophie, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be with you. I'll pull up some slides here and just confirming you can see those. Looks good. So thank you so much, Sharon, for the wonderful introduction. Really fantastic framework that you've all developed here with the Healthier and More Sustainable Diets group. And it's a pleasure to be with you and among some colleagues, and looking forward to the dialogue from everyone who's joining us. So I'm Sophie Egan. I am Director of Strategy for Food for Climate League. I won't go through all these, but I wear a lot of hats. And in broad strokes, I really work to advance solutions, really accelerate the implementation of solutions at the intersection of food, health, and climate. And I work both top down and bottom up in the sense of equipping consumers or eaters to navigate the food environments we currently have. That's through my writing work, contributing to the New York Times health section, and through as an author, most recently of How to Be a Conscious Eater. And then kind of top down, much like the work that all of you do, really shifting the environment to begin with to make those healthier and more sustainable choices as easy, alluring, culturally relevant, accessible, affordable, and positively irresistible as possible. Food for Climate League is a trailblazing, women-led nonprofit, and our mission is to make climate-smart eating the norm. So we really work to connect the dots between food and climate, and then to connect the dots between sustainable food culture or climate-friendly foods and people's unique needs, values, and cultures. And that is really kind of, you can come at that from many different angles, but our approach is through narrative and behavioral sciences. We really try to tackle one of the biggest barriers to wider adoption of climate smart eating, which is the perception of it. People think it's not for them. They think it's elitist. They think it's not very delicious. They think it's inaccessible. They think it's expensive. There's many kind of sub-perceptions. Perhaps some cases are misperceptions, but they're people's lived realities. And those perceptions are something that we can work to shift through the power of narrative and really through the power of social norms. We have a phenomenal team, and in fact, one of our founding board members, Dorothy Shaver, is here with us today, so I get points for having her on my slide, I was told. But it's really an incredible group, and we bring many different skill sets and a wide reach of expertise. Our ecosystem has grown dramatically since our founding in 2019, and we've really evolved not only the sponsors and grantors that support our work, but our partnerships, and collaboration is really key to what we do because of the urgency and scale of the challenges that we're trying to tackle. So we were born because we saw this real gap in terms of how climate-friendly foods were being positioned. In the past, we saw that more often than not, sustainable food messages were only speaking to one of the three core human needs. They were really purpose-driven, and many of the times this continues today. It's go zero waste because the planet is counting on you. Eat a vegan diet or because you're a good person. Really kind of these altruistic, sort of do the right thing types of narrative frames that do speak to some people in some need states, meaning at some points in their life, at some points in the day, some eating occasions, but really misses the opportunity to kind of resonate with the other coexisting desires, which broadly speaking can be distilled into control and community. And this is the Maslow's hierarchy of needs grouped into those three core areas. So our approach is to craft messages that speak to every essential human need and therefore increase the relevancy and reach, and ultimately make these types of these ways of eating, the whole range of climate smart ways of eating, really resonate with the masses. So I was asked to share some of our insights so far in advancing and understanding really climate-friendly food narratives, as well as some of the trends. So I'm going to share with you examples from 3 different projects. The first was a collaboration with Datassential, one of the leading consumer insights firms in the US, particular focus on food service and restaurant industry. And we want to understand, how does connection or interest or excitement, time spent thinking about food, being a foodie, connect to concerns about climate, and therefore, to that point I mentioned before, really the ability to make that connection in terms of taking action toward a more sustainable food choice. So we really zeroed in on foodies. This was a survey of over 1,000 people in the US about their food attitudes. So this is not action, this is just intentions. And we really know that there's a big gap between intention and action, so I just give that caveat. But nonetheless, we wanted to see, is this something that they're thinking about? In general, what you find is that people across the board, whether they're foodies or not, experience negative emotions when thinking about climate change. Over here, it's feeling scared and powerless, overwhelmed. Foodies do seem to care more. This is kind of on their radar in terms of climate action, separate from food though. And they're also interested in purchasing foods that have a social mission, that connect to the local community. And the really interesting thing about this though is that we see this concern on the one hand in terms of the climate crisis, interest in purchasing foods that have these kind of social elements, Yet, we find that foodies are not yet viewing food as a primary avenue for taking action. So that's a really exciting opportunity. These are just some slides that kind of underscore how that connection is not yet being made. And essentially what you find is that foodies are not that much different than than the general population with respect to how they're seeing kind of the opportunities to do something about global warming. And the other thing that may be of no surprise to anyone in this group is really consistent with other findings. And this is changing over time, but we do find that concerns about climate ranks lower than other priorities when making a food choice in general. So the key takeaways are that foodies especially want to take action on climate change. They have a strong interest in foods and social goals, not yet connecting the dots. We also see that really there's this opportunity to reframe sustainable eating to connect to those higher priority needs. And that's a really strong theme of Food for Climate League's work, is to kind of identify, meet people where they're at, see what are those higher priority, higher ranking concerns: affordability, cultural relevance, heritage, medical needs, and much of what you shared at the beginning, Sharon, about kind of that personalized, individualized context, and sort of back into the sustainable choice, if that makes sense. So a project we did that we're actually continuing to do right now that is a specific area. I started with kind of just food and climate big picture, but now to dive into two specific kinds of climate smart eating. So we are working on a project to develop new narratives in order to drive demand for specifically bivalves and seaweeds. And we're in partnership with Food and Planet, a fantastic nonprofit in the US. And the reason that we're focusing on these two categories, and especially sea vegetables, mussels, and clams, is they've been identified by a lot of different scientific papers, recently, for example, the Blue Food Assessment, as really the optimal food categories from aquatic systems that can optimize nutrition, support equitable livelihoods, lowest environmental impact, all in the vein of feeding a growing global population over time. Fun fact, we do a lot of message testing. We want to know, you might have noticed that I used the word sea vegetables. We want to know what terms actually resonate the most, what might make a different type of sustainable food more or less appealing. Bottom line, sea vegetables in our study was the term of most appeal, and people weren't confused. They didn't know, they didn't have this kind of, one of our concerns was, would that be too confusing? Would that be something that's unfamiliar? And it was not an issue. That was in the US, by the way. And the other really exciting piece of this work is that we integrate a ton of different types of both qualitative and quantitative research. So this slide captures just the diversity of data inputs. And I'll share briefly that we did a really exciting study with MotiveBase, which is a tool that does AI-enabled anthropological insights finding and kind of scraping of online conversations. And what you see is that both bivalves and seaweeds are really poised for growth. So in terms of trends, I'm not the first to tell you, but I am at least one of the people to emphasize this is a big trend. Aquatic foods, but bivalves and especially seaweeds in terms of growth rate. Now they're starting not at really high levels of resonance, but the uptick potential is substantial. With bivalves, we see that leaning into that healthy protein angle while managing safety risks is going to be key. On the seaweed side, exciting and unique taste, and really emphasizing nutrition. So there's a lot more to learn, but so far we found that there's a strong theme. You saw the kind of three areas I mentioned of control, community, and purpose. And so far we're finding that it's this really strong theme around control that is what's driving appeal of these two food categories. People can take control over their health, their finances, while controlling for mitigating risks. Risks around food safety concerns, questions about contaminants, toxins, other kind of unknowns in the context of seaweed and bivalves. But they're also looking for control in the sense of, have I experienced this food before? How do I bridge that familiarity gap in some contexts? Bivalves are particularly exciting in the context of community. One of the things we want to overcome is that right now they're perceived as only for special occasions. So we're excited to drive demand in the context of more prepared foods at retail as kind of a bridge between away from home and at home, but also just kind of demystifying, pointing to frozen bivalves, frozen mussels, frozen clams is something that you can make a really versatile, delicious meal for your family at home. And then of course, we're going to do all of what we do messaging-wise through the most trusted voices. So lastly, I'm going to share just really briefly one of the most interesting findings from one of two studies we did in fall of 2020 with Food at Google, as well as the Sodexo Future Food Collective, where we actually looked at specific menu dish descriptions. And the question here was around agrobiodiversity, which of course Dorothy's going to speak to in a moment. And we wanted to know, how might we increase purchases of agrobiodiverse menu items, or at least purchase intent, through communication. So we had these 3 different dishes. One was a sustainable animal protein, one was analog alt meat, and one was a purely vegan dish. And the main thing I want to let you know, and that is incredibly important across the board, is that one size does not fit all when it comes to messaging about sustainable food options. This was true in this specific study, but it's true more broadly. And we found that really strong variation by demographics, by generation, in terms of purchase intent. So a really simple and fun party communication angle resonated with Gen Z. Restorative and healing kind of message resonated with millennials. And this was a dish description here. Gen X, control, and so forth. So the point there really is that to optimize how you talk about food and climate, you really need to understand the distinct needs and values of your target audience and customize and tailor your communications accordingly. So I'll leave it there, and I think I'm turning it to my colleague, Dorothy.
Great, thanks so much, Sophie. And I am very proud to be a founding member of course, the Food for Climate League. And I'm also the Food Sustainability Director for Unilever. So I'm gonna see if I can share my screen. Let me see really quickly. I think I can. I of course have many things open, so I actually want to only share with you my slides because I don't want you to see how many things I have open at the same time. So let me just pull up that slide. So it's great to be here with everybody today. I'm of course in this group, so I've met many of you before, whether it be here or in other coalitions that we're part of. So what I'm going to talk to you today about is how Unilever really implements a lot of the work that Sophie was talking about at a large scale. So as many of you know, let me see what you can see here. Let me see, hold on. As many of you know, Unilever is a large company, and we have a big impact across a variety of countries. So we are in most countries in the world. 1 in 3 people eat our products every day. And we cover loads of brands, including of course, Hellmann's, Knorr, Ben & Jerry's, Breyers, and a variety of other brands across the world. So I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about what we're doing and how we're really part of the solution when it comes to looking at how we utilize our resources in a better way when it comes to food agriculture and making sure that we get the most nutrients when it comes to food consumption. So as Sophie rightly talked about, we do know that people are worried about the space of food agriculture's impact on the planet, whether it be on climate change, whether it be on pollution, whether it be on packaging use, or whether it be on just where their food's coming from. So we know that there is a major role for us to play in Unilever, and we do take responsibility in that, in really saying that we need to take a positive outlook and understanding that food is the strongest lever to optimize human health and environmental sustainability on Earth. So, as having all of these brands under our belt, we have the responsibility, but we also have the opportunity to say, look, we reach a whole lot of people. We have credibility in a lot of homes. We move to a lot of places to really say that we really need to be the ones to make sustainable living commonplace. So we work through our brands to make sure that they all have a purpose. So Knorr's purpose is to make great food taste good through the Future 50 Foods and the work we're doing in sustainable and regenerative agriculture. Hellmann's, of course, does the Make Taste Not Waste campaign, which some of you may be familiar with. Our vegetarian butcher does a lot in relation to eliminating animals from the supply chain. And all of us really work to really say, we really need to work with a purpose that we want to make sustainable living commonplace. And what this means is that we need to bring everyday foods to everyday people all over the world that are better for them and better for the planet. And that's what we really aim to do through our really ambitious sustainability commitments that run across climate and nature, plastics, society, clean future, future foods, and positive beauty. So as many of you know, we go across many more brands beyond just our food brands and our ice cream brands into a lot of course, beauty brands and also household good brands. And through all of the brands, we work really, really hard to move forward to say, we need to decarbonize our whole entire supply chain. We need to actually move away from plastics. We need to make sure that we're contributing to a positive society. We need to make sure that while we are in people's homes and helping them clean, that we're also providing them with healthy and good products that will not only clean their surfaces, but also won't hurt them. We're really working forward in the future foods consumption area to say we need to double the positive nutrients in our foods while making sure that we're growing foods in the right way. And I'll go into that a little bit more. And also we need to be part of a positive beauty movement. And this is a lot of the work that Dove's doing in relation to saying, we really need to stand for women's self-esteem across many different body types, across many different races across the world. So this is some of the work we're doing in all of our brands. And when it comes to what we're doing in the food system, all of you know this, of course, we know that we need to work from farm to fork and back and forth to say, you know, we need to lower the environmental impact of our food. We need to decrease the resources that we're utilizing. We need to restore the soil health. We need to restore biodiversity because of the problems that we've caused with food agriculture in the past and also hopefully not in the future. We also know that we are dealing with major problems in the space of hunger and also in obesity, and that is severely increasing as a result of the food crisis that we're going through. We also know that 1/3 of food is wasted, which is absolutely crazy when it comes to the challenges we have in our food system today, to say that we're actually wasting some of that amazing food. So there's a lot for us to do in the food system perspective, and there's a lot that Unilever is doing. So we're working toward more plant-based products, not just through meat alternatives such as vegetarian butcher, but also in our everyday foods such as our Knorr products, our bouillons, our rice sides, also our Hellmann's mayonnaise. We now have a vegan option. We also have a vegan Magnum bar and also a lot of vegan Ben & Jerry's products. So we're really pushing forward to have plant-based products. And not just plant-based products for plant-based products, but to really say, we're going to advertise more our plant-based products than our non-plant-based products to get them out there and to really see people not only have an option, but also it's a viable option for everybody, for mainstream. And we really want to move sustainable living from niche to mainstream. We have an ambition to double 2 times positive nutrition via Feature 50 Foods and fortification. We have a fortification ambition, and we just actually put iodized salts in a huge amount of our products across the world to help decrease iodine deficiency. We have an ambition to have the food loss and waste in our supply chain, but also on plates to, of course, continuing lowering negative nutrients such as calories, salt, sugar, and also, of course, to grow ingredients in ways that sustain, restore, and regenerate nature, which is what I spend a whole lot of my time on right now. So we work through our brands with a purpose, and we also have these sustainability credentials. Unilever has been growing foods in sustainable ways for more than 12 years, and we're really pushing forward to say, how do we actually make this commercially viable? How do we tell the stories to consumers? How do we tell the stories to farmers to really say, you know, it's better for all of us if we grow our foods in better ways? And we're doing that very strongly through our Knorr brand, which is Unilever's largest food brand. And we also have worked really hard in this space to say, we really need to be thought leaders. And what do we need to do to be there? We need to be upfront at different things like COP. So we were at COP26, we'll be at COP27 in 1 week, really showing that we have thought leadership in this space. We've published a variety of different reports. We've been a part of a lot of different movements to say, you know, we really need to get food on the map when it comes to events such as COP27, but also getting them into the Paris Agreement compilations that all of the countries need to do to say what they're going to do to move toward the 1.5 Paris Agreement. We've also we've also said that, you know, we're really going to move forward together with our suppliers and our farmers to say we need to really push our sustainability credentials, not just to have sustainably grown ingredients, but all the way into restoring and regenerating. And that's what we've done over the past year. So last year we launched the Regenerative Agriculture Principles. And this year we've pushed forward with a 90 project roadmap, which will really move into a lot of our brands. So 80% of the key ingredients in Knorr will be sourced regeneratively by 2026. So what is this about? It's not just about doing one thing on either side or one part of kind of the food spectrum. And it's really about growing and eating the right foods in the right ways, in the right places, in the right amounts for the benefit of people and the planet. And this is what we're working to do through our very reputable brands that are in everyday homes, and also through the work that we're doing with our suppliers, our retailers, and our partners. So what do we mean by the right foods? And what we mean by the right foods is a variety of plants. So our brands are really working really hard to get the recipes out there that have really good nutritious ingredients, leafy green vegetables, to get those nuts into recipes, to get lots of beans out there, to say, you know, when we move forward in a plant-powered way, really get those on the plates, and we are the ones that add the flavor, we will add value from a perspective of being something that people want to eat when it comes to beans, when it comes to vegetables, if we provide the right recipes, but also really being there to say, look, it actually can be easy, it can be convenient, and it can be cost effective to eat a wide variety of plants. And this is why. And that's the story that we aim to tell through our brands of Knorr and also through Hellmann's. We also, as I said, we're moving really toward growing our foods in regenerative ways. So we're really worked for more than 12 years with our suppliers and farmers to grow food in ways that sustain the land and its resources. But due to the damage that we've done as a result of food agriculture, we really need to regenerate these resources when it comes to nature and when it comes to the livelihoods of our farmers. So this is something that we're really pushing hard to do, and we're in the implementation stage with a lot of our suppliers. We've brought all of our suppliers on board now. We're working together with our suppliers who work directly with our farmers to train them on these principles that will really improve soil health, improve biodiversity, decrease greenhouse gas emissions, and hopefully increase the amount of money that they get as a result of farming. So these are some of the things that we're doing within Unilever in order for us to really say, you know, we really need to not just go for the right foods, but we need to actually grow them in the right ways. But those go hand in hand, and the narrative needs to go hand in hand. It isn't just about making sure that we're eating the right foods. It isn't just about making sure that we're growing them in the right way. That has to happen together. And the only way that we can do that is to make sure that our brands bring this to life. So our brands have a variety of commitments just themselves to say we absolutely need to move forward away from deforestation, of course, and we need to move forward with sustainably sourced regenerative agriculture and really moving beyond just our happy cow movement, which we've done for many years with Ben & Jerry's, and really into implementing regenerative dairy principles. So as I already said, we're really pushing forward with the Knorr brand. We already have 8 projects off the ground, which are in rice, tomatoes, wheat, pumpkins, and peas. So that's across a variety of our different suppliers and farms in the US and in Europe. And we're moving forward to go into our really large volume ingredients, such as starches and other types of big ingredients, our oils and things like that. We're moving into those in the coming years, to really say that we want to be part of a big movement to really increase species below and above ground, improve soil health, increase nutrients in the soil, of course, increase water and resource efficiency, improve livelihoods, and ultimately increase in jobs. It's predicted that we will have at least a third decrease in greenhouse gas emissions and decrease in water use, but we've actually already seen in our projects in rice for Knorr size in the US, soybeans and Hellmann's in the US, that we've had at least a 30% decrease in greenhouse gas emissions and in water used. So hopefully we're off to a good start. Every year is really different when it comes to agriculture, so it's hard to really predict how this will go forward, but we're hoping that these principles really pan out to show that we can grow foods in better ways, utilizing less resources and actually really restoring the land. So I've spoken about a few of these already. We visited a lot of our farms, such as the Spanish tomato growers, and they were very happy after just year 1 to show that they could actually see an increase in yield as a result of utilizing less pesticides and less fertilizers, which decreased their actually on-ground costs, because as you know, fertilizers have become very, very expensive. They've not only decreased their costs, but they actually see a higher yield. So that's a wonderful thing to look at. But the problem is that a lot of the work that we're doing and a lot of the work that other companies are doing, some of which we're actually doing in partnership with companies such as Pepsi, is that we're planting a lot of cover crops to really naturally nourish the soil between harvests, but we're not eating those cover crops. So there's a lot of beans that are cover crops, which Paul will speak to, and we need to start eating more of those in order to make sure that we're not wasting food, and to make sure that we actually are doubling the income really of the farmers if we actually did eat those cover crops instead of just letting them go back into the soil. So it's one example of really saying we don't need to just work on the way it's grown, but we actually need to work on the type of foods that we eat. So this is just a little bit about our project in Arkansas. So we work with a 4C model. So we really look at the country and the community itself. We then look at the crop, and we're working with our supplier of our largest rice supplier in the US. And also, of course, rice has the highest impact on greenhouse gas emissions of any non-animal food product. And also it uses the most water. So it's really important for us to take a look at white rice, although it's not the most nutritious grain. It is the most consumed grain. So that's why we decided to really go in on the white rice, because if we really master being able to grow it with less greenhouse gas emissions and less water, we can, of course, hopefully utilize that as we go forward to scale, and also share these principles and the practices outside of our company with our partners, which we're very much doing through our coalitions. We also make sure that we grow them in the right places in the right amounts. We have a partnership with Grow Intelligence to really help us be able to say, where can foods be grown in the face of climate change, where foods are grown now, and what land suitability they have in the future. This helps us decrease the risk that we have in our own supply chain, and we're also utilizing that data beyond just our supply in partnership with others. So our role in Unilever is really to do the right thing, but also to make sure that it's compelling to consumers. If it's not compelling to consumers, it doesn't help us increase loyalty, it doesn't help us accelerate growth or increase our market value, then we actually won't be in business. So we need to do the right thing, but we also need to do it in the right way and really bring it forward, utilizing the magic of our wonderful marketeers in the company to say, you know, this is better for you, better for the planet, but it's also cooler and it will make you feel better, and all of these wonderful things that Sophie talked about, to make it really mainstream so that it's not really seen as niche, but really making sustainable living commonplace. So we work together with loads of partners. Of course, Food for Climate League and Chefs Manifesto are two of our main partners we work with, but of course we also work really closely with our retailers, with our suppliers, our farmers, and of course with NGOs and others, and also with technology to make sure that we get the right foods grown and we make sure that we get them to the masses. So thank you so much. Again, I'm Dorothy Shaver, and I'm happy to hand it over to Paul from Chefs Manifesto SDG2, who will talk to you, I'm sure, about beans, amongst other things. So thank you so much, everybody.
Well, thank you, Dorothy, and also Sophie. It's so good to be following some partners and friends and just real champions for really driving forward change in how we eat food, including beans. And Dorothy and I were together last week and we talked about beans quite a lot. So she did very well at getting a number of bean mentions in. Look, I want to just talk to you about a couple of things in particular in our projects, but I just wanted to zoom out slightly because I do think both Dorothy and Sophie have mentioned in different ways some of the challenges that we do face in our food system, but I do think the need for change is really great. At the moment, we're facing a global food crisis alongside a climate crisis, alongside a cost of living crisis, and all of you, I'm sure, are very, very aware of the urgency for change, the importance for our businesses, but for also our customers and for our planet to be able to all thrive in the world that we're in. You know, there's lots of statistics being thrown around, and it sometimes can get us a little bit lost, a little bit confused, but I do think it's important for us to understand some of the scale. You know, the world is going to hit 8 billion people, I think in the coming week or very, very soon. We're clocking over that 8 billion mark, but 3 billion people are suffering some form of malnutrition. And the number at the moment of people really facing hunger is increasing in all parts of the world. And you know, we're looking at the fact that 3.1 billion people can't afford a healthy diet, and so things like diversification of our diet, food fortification, how we address some of these issues is really critical in our product formulation, in the way that we're putting together ingredients, but then also what we're promoting and how we're investing our marketing dollars into shifting diets in smart ways. There's a stat that came out from UNICEF just recently that says that 2 in 3 children between the ages of 6 months and 2 years are not getting the diverse diet they need to grow up well, which puts them at risk of malnutrition. And so I think there's a real opportunity here for us to do this. We also obviously know about the fact that the food system really plays a major role in a lot of our biodiversity loss. You know, in soil is becoming very important for us to talk about, and, you know, soil's being lost at up to 100 times faster than it's forming. And then there's just so many other impacts that are happening, which make our system very fragile. So, you know, how we think about biodiversity is so key, to really think about different species that we can be, you know, bringing into the food system. And so there's been lots of work on this. I think Future 50 Foods was an amazing report just to take some of the complexity of these big numbers and go, let's talk about 50 things that are good for people and planet. And here's how you can make them exciting and taste amazing. And we've done a lot of work on this, where you've seen just an amazing engagement from people just going, oh, what are those 50 foods? Oh, how many do I eat? Oh, where do I get that from? Oh, what's your favorite? And, you know, just seeing that kind of engagement around ingredients is really hard to do. And so also really hard to do on things that are also good for people and planet. And so I think this is really key. So I think, you know, as we move that forward, we really need to think about how we can kind of change people's relationship to food and the way that we produce and consume it, you know, how we excite people about food that's good for people, planet and prosperity, but also offer solutions which are affordable, accessible and available to all. Because I think sometimes we can get into trend setting, but then we struggle with affordability and accessibility. So we can either drive foods to become less accessible, or less affordable, or they start out that way. And so thinking about how we move that along is really key. I wanted to just tell you about a coalition that we're building and also a network that we lead, and how we're approaching biodiversity, affordability and accessibility of good food. So I'm just going to share my screen in a way that doesn't do what Dorothy was worried about doing and show you all the tabs I have open. But let me just see. Okay, here we go. I think this is working. So one of the things I wanted to talk to you about was beans. And so we are at the moment developing a campaign that's going to launch in just over a week. And this was an idea that was developed at a meeting in the UN Food Systems Summit, where Sam Kass, who some of you know, was talking about the complexity in our food system and talking about how do we drive forward change in a way that can help get everyone kind of moving together around a couple of common goals that, you know, most people wouldn't disagree with. There's a pretty universal connection globally. And he started to talk about beans, and he said, what if we could double the consumption of beans? What would that do in terms of transitions, in terms of our diet, in terms of climate impacts? And so we've been trying to work through what that looks like. Coming out of the Food Systems Summit, which was quite busy for everyone who was involved, we've kind of given it a bit of space and started to do some research and thinking about, and some engagement with people to think about how could we do this. So we've announced this campaign in September alongside the president of Rwanda at the AGRF. And we're set to have this official launch with the UNFCCC on the 12th of November. And so we're kind of bringing this together at the moment. The ambition is to really double the global production and consumption of beans. And this includes peas, pulses, lentils, and legumes. We're particularly using the word beans because even though pulses is technically correct, because a lot of people in the world don't know what pulses are, and they don't naturally have an affinity to pulses. So we're using beans as a way in. And then the idea is to open up that conversation around the variety there. Around the world, even today, I was talking with some bean scientists about how many beans there are. And I was, they were telling me that there's over 40,000 plus varieties that are in storage in the gene bank in Cali, Colombia, of which there's a number that are unedible, but there is also a number that are edible, of which 630 varieties have been taken to market by the Pan-African Bean Alliance from that center, and that's just them. So there's a huge number of beans in terms of what we can do. And so there's a huge amount of potential as well. So the idea with this campaign is to try and take into account some of the challenges that we face and then highlight a simple solution that everyone can do. So often people get overwhelmed with what's going on around the world. And so the idea is, how do you kind of answer different questions through different ways in one kind of simple ask? And so the kind of the framing is about how we could utilize, there's lots of new technologies that people think that they need to bring in. There's lots of new foods that we need to create, but also there's some things in our cupboards that we might be able to utilize to also make an impact. And so looking at that, thinking about sustainable yet nutritious meals, eating our way to a better future, tackling climate change a meal at a time, thinking about making affordable and delicious meals, we see that beans can be one of the ways in which to do this. We've been kind of thinking about beans as this simple, affordable solution to some of our global financial health and climate problems. And I think, the financial pressure that people are under around food, around bills, is really critical to come up with solutions that make sense. And we see beans as, nutritious. They've got an excellent source of dietary fiber, protein, iron, zinc, B, vitamins, and many other important vitamins and minerals. They're affordable. They're one of the most widely consumed food types in many low-income settings. They can be really tasty. There's a huge amount of variety of types and recipes, and this can be used across, meals and, from breakfast right through to the evening. They're very resilient. They're very marketable. They're great for farmers, so they store well. So lots of different things, and we're pivoting around that. So that's just a little snapshot. If people do want to find out more about the campaign, we can share more on that, and there'll be a website and everything going live as of next week. The other network that I wanted to talk about, which Dorothy mentioned, is the Chefs Manifesto. And this is another group that we've partnered with. So chefs, we know, play an important role in driving action. They're on the front lines of their communities and have a real in-depth knowledge of the food system, of value chains. They have a skill in creating delicious meals. And one of the things that I think is most important is they're very trusted. People trust chefs to talk about food. And so as they go to restaurants, they really do trust people in putting together food. So we developed a framework by chefs for chefs with support of people like Dorothy and Unilever, and have over 1,000 chefs now from 90 countries across the globe that collaborate under a set of thematic areas. These 8 areas are framed from the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and they basically connect the work chefs do into the SDGs, and so ladder up into the sub-goals and the way that we can drive action. Chefs are doing great work, but this framework helps to connect them in a way that they can then communicate better, and they can focus on different areas that they're working on. We then have built under that a series of actions that they can lead around, and protecting biodiversity and improving animal welfare is one that they do a little bit of work around. And this can go everything from promoting grains like funio and millets and different grains which use less water and are more nutrient dense. There's going to be a bit of work around beans in this space, but also looking at aquatic foods and different other elements in terms of animal proteins and how people can transition. We also, think about things like livelihoods. And so each of these has actions that chefs can take and then how they can drive them forward. And so this is, I suppose, just an example of how chefs can play that role. but how they also, we've collaborated showcasing different ingredients that are, you know, in different ways, doing dinners, doing recipes, doing videos, doing other content that just really helps to kind of communicate and get that across. So, you know, I think at the moment, when we do have so many people looking to chefs for inspiration, it's really important that we also give chefs the information that they need so that they can then communicate in such a way that helps to get across the right kinds of elements. So I'll probably leave it there. I just want to say, I think, you know, it's really important that, you know, how we help consumers to play a role in driving this change is really key. And so that involves making it, you know, accessible, but also presenting it to them in the right way. And I think things like, you know, it could be choosing eating more beans or fortified ingredients or eating locally or seasonally. All of these things can lead to positive outcomes for people and planet.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Sophie, Dorothy, and Paul. A huge amount of information and lots to unpick. So thank you so much for sharing. Kind of resonated with me as we see kind of in my day job, that gap between what you described, Sophie, as what we want to do and how we want to, good for me and good for the planet, and the reality of we've not reached the mass market yet. And then Dorothy, the amount of initiatives that happen at an organization such as Unilever and kind of connecting the dots between all of those. And then Paul, the climate crisis and just the reality of bringing healthy, sustainable, affordable, accessible all together. And then the simplicity of beans is now. Love it. So thank you so much for sharing. So I'll jump right into the questions, and as we're talking, don't hesitate to type more into the chat. So first question, this is actually something that we are looking at tackling as a global coalition around. Do you have any recommendations on how to engage vulnerable communities or how to facilitate the accessibility of healthier and more sustainable or / future foods and reaching the most vulnerable? Paul, you did mention it. So maybe I'll start with you, Paul, and then Sophie and Dorothy, please do jump in on this.
Yeah, look, I think this is a really good question. And I think this accessibility and affordability is key. I think one of the things is to think obviously still about cost, convenience and taste in decision-making around food. And so I think, you know, it's thinking about convenience is often one of these things that we struggle with because we want to give whole foods, we want to give, but, you know, people that are working 2 jobs, they often need convenient food. They need resources to be able to juggle. And so I think, you know, it's really important to make sure that availability is there. I'm seeing lots of innovation around localization as well. So looking at flavors that are being built for different communities, packaging that makes sense for those communities, all kinds of communication that makes sense for those communities. And so I think, you know, it's really important to think about context when you're also looking at vulnerable communities and make sure that things are being presented in the right way. But I also think, you know, as we've been talking about beans, it's a simple, you know, accessible thing, but it's often seen as a poor food. And so what we also need to do is elevate it because it is an amazing food. And talking to most dietitians or nutritionists, they would agree, you know, beans are one of the best things you can be eating in your diet, obviously with the right kinds of carbohydrates and other things. But, you know, so there's a lot of interesting kind of angles there.
Yeah, I'm happy to just build on that briefly. I think Paul answered that beautifully, and it's an incredibly important question. It's a tough one to design solutions around that are broad in nature. So I think that localized context specific is key. And my answer is a little bit about how do you do that? So there are several research methodologies that we really align with and incorporate into our work that really aim to empower those communities to be the designers. So equity-centered community design and community-based participatory research. And these elements essentially say, you're our co-researchers. You are the holders of this knowledge. You will benefit. It's the sort of by chefs for chefs. It's the by these communities for these communities. And just even kind of backing up into what are you trying to solve for? And in those methods, what really occurs is that you start out with what's top of mind, putting dinner on my table, on the table. convenience, the time crunch, the taste. My kids are picky; they won't eat X, Y, Z. Stretching the budget for SNAP or other kind of federal assistance programs gets really tough toward the end of the month. So got to kind of allocate that throughout the month. Whatever it might be, those insights can be unearthed if you're incorporating those types of methods. So that's just one kind of approach that's really important. And then the other thing that we found, this question came up, we led a training with the New York City Mayor's Office for Climate Week in September. This question came up a bit from some folks who work with, for example, homeless services agencies, trying to say, how do I talk about this to my constituents? And really underscoring where this doesn't have to be something new and fancy. I hear Paul's point certainly about the elevation can help increase the appeal. But on the flip side, it's also showing peanut butter is a climate-friendly food. It's a really environmentally nutrition-packed, widely affordable, widely utilized in a lot of different cuisines and cultures. And that example is sort of a light bulb for people, because it's not an Impossible Burger. It's not and no judgment on any analogs or anything like that, but it's just to say, you might actually already be doing more of this than you realize. And that can develop a bit of a positive feedback loop and empowerment, where it kind of decreases the distance between where people are, how people are already living their lives, and where sort of they're being urged to go, if that makes sense. Because it does feel like, oh yeah, I have that on my shelf at home, or maybe I don't even have a kitchen, but maybe I have a hot plate, and here's all the different things that I can do with just an example being a jar of peanut butter or beans or a bag of rice, right, and so forth. So those are just two thoughts, but I really do think that not losing sight of this question is incredibly important for all of us going forward.
Dorothy, do you want to add to that?
Well, I think it was very well answered by both Paul and Sophie. Happy to just add a little bit on from Unilever's perspective. So understanding kind of where people are today and looking at really kind of affordability, time, and convenience. We're working on some really cool programs in the US and in Europe. And also we already have ongoing programs in Indonesia and the Philippines that really focus on helping people learn how to cook really nutritious, planet-friendly meals that aren't expensive. So we've been doing that in the Philippines and in Indonesia for a really long time through the programs that they have through the schools, but also the ones that they have in the communities, to help with parents and caretakers really understand how to cook beans, how to cook leafy green vegetables, and how to really make them flavorful that their kids will eat them. So we've been working on those for quite some time. In the US, we've been working together with a variety of different chefs to really help people understand that, it doesn't need to be really expensive. It doesn't need to take forever to make a really easy meal, for example, with our rice sides or with a bouillon cube or with leftovers and with Hellmann's mayonnaise. So it is very much top of mind with the programs that we're doing through Unilever. And it's also really top of mind in relation to the programs that we're doing on growing foods in better ways. So the intention is for us to, in making sustainable living commonplace, it's about us growing foods better and growing better foods, and trying not to increase the price in doing so. So although we're of course investing into the agricultural side or into the better ingredients, it really won't always show up on the price of the product. So that is something that we work really hard to do, to really make it so everybody has access to foods that are better for them and the planet.
Great, and I'll just jump to, we spoke one other question on the consumer side. I want to jump to the farmer side. And the question is, how can farmers be engaged in this initiative? Let's just take that as kind of the theme as a whole. And how can we promote this so that they want to and feel engaged? And how do you do that actually in your day-to-day work?
Do you want me to go first?
Go for it, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So when it comes to working with farmers, I don't want to make it seem like it's any easy feat to get farmers to change, because by nature of what they're doing, they are quite risk averse, and they're the experts on their farm, and they're the experts with growing the foods that they grow. So we have to work very carefully to make sure that we're actually working with a community of farmers. So we have in different markets, we have a group of farmers that we work with in the US, we have farmers that we work with in India, and we have farmers that we work with in Europe. So we try to work through kind of farmer to farmer conversations to get them to really talk about the benefits of growing foods in ways that are better for nature and better for the environment and use less resources, and really try to use them for the case studies, because it isn't really effective for, as you can imagine, for, Unilever employee or, myself to go to these farmers and say, you should grow these foods in different ways, when they're really the experts and they're the ones that have been working with their farms for quite some time. So we try to really do it through a coalition kind of effect. We also try to work with them to incentivize them to learn, and also to guarantee that we will offtake the supply if it doesn't, say, produce as much the first year round, or if the harvest doesn't go as well. So we try to decrease the risk of moving forward, and we try to use a collaborative effort between farmers to get them to kind of talk to each other, to convince each other that this is the right way to go forward.
Great, thank you. Paul or Sophie, you want to jump in on that one?
Sure. Yeah. Just briefly, I think we think about it in a lot of ways in terms of food culture. So that's the area that we're really working on. And what that means in terms of farmer engagement is often demonstrating demand. If we are able to illustrate that either there's a growing market for these types of foods, that's an incentive to use Dorothy's great word there, because a lot of times the question is, will this be a financially, it's that risk averse piece. It's if you can show the investment that they're making while covering. So for example, obviously in organic transitions, I think programs that really kind of do de-risk through, premiums for transitional years and so forth. But big picture showing, hey, the demand is heading in this direction. Consumers really do want these options. They want to know that they're grown in these ways. So both what they're growing and how. That's the part that we try to instill some of that confidence and demonstrate that this is not sort of only for a niche market. And that's sort of just a broad comment. But the other piece is very much like Dorothy mentioned, we actually are facilitating farmer-led roundtables on the aquatic foods piece to connect them with one another, and also hear from them how they would like to be able to kind of speak with confidence, market their own products and be their own best advocates, and kind of create that viral or network effect among their peer farmers.
Great, thank you. Paul, and I'll move to a question that was for you in the campaign. Does it apply in other countries than the ones that you mentioned? I presume this is fully global.
We're building this out globally. So obviously it's as you launch, you need to be a little bit more tight as you're kind of building out. But we are hoping to develop this in a way that brings in partners from around the world. So the idea is we're launching it at COP, and then the idea is to go above the line more and start to really roll out projects in market next year. And then it goes over 5 years. So we'll kind of probably start in a few regions and then start to bring on partners and try and expand from there. But we've had reach, from country teams that are keen to kind of grab hold of this and take it forward in different parts of the world already.
Great, thank you. And we're almost coming up to the top of the hour, so maybe I'll be able to squeeze in two more questions. So one was and recommendations for retailers. We have a huge retailing community at the Consumer Goods Forum, examples of actions that they can take. So if you do have a recommendation for the retailers listening, we'd love to share that. And then a final question, Dorothy, for you around fortification of staple foods like the white rice example that you mentioned. Are you doing something around fortification? So maybe with recommendation for retailers listening, and then Dorothy, the question on food fortification.
Maybe if I jump in, Sharon, one thing that I would say for retailers, I mean, we've been talking to quite a few retailers about different things, and they've often got very key focuses around their sustainability commitments, but then they also have big, focus on cost of living crisis at the moment. And so I think, there's a win-win here around sustainability and cost of living with, products like beans that are more sustainable, and how retailers could collaborate to kind of put them forward in different ways. That could be in product formulation for like cafes and elements, to loyalty programs in terms of putting things in front of consumers, to in-store activations. And that could be done through meal kits, to all kinds of things. It could be a collaboration with a Unilever Knorr brand and beans, you know, to create meal kits around something. You know, there's lots of different elements that could be bought in, but I do think retail, this connection between costs and their sustainability commitments there's a unique time that we're in at the moment that I think could really help drive some of that shift in investment.
Great, thank you. And that is
Great, I
definitely
know-
something that we'll take up. Yeah.
I know
Sophie.
Dorothy's going to have the last word on fortification, so I'll just super quickly say, not always leading with climate and often intentionally leading with those other higher priority aspects, much like Paul said, but affordability, convenience, and then also making these options more familiar through steps like sampling, through special promotions, through prepared foods, as I mentioned, is another example, not overlooking that piece, which eliminates the questions or a lack of understanding around cooking and just gets trial and taste of the actual ingredients. And then lastly, we're always looking for partners to test different messages actually in store. So if that's of interest, please be in touch. We do a lot of both online testing, but we actually now have some retail partners to do different comparisons of messaging and pairing that with the choice architecture. So where it's actually placed in store.
Well, Sophie, we definitely have to have a conversation on that. Dorothy, we'll leave the last word to you before we wrap it up.
Okay, super. So in the space of fortification, we have a commitment to provide more than 200 billion servings of at least one of the 5 key micronutrients via fortification. And right now we're just over about 161 billion servings at the end of last year. So we're likely to meet that because we have, as I said, recently fortified quite a few of our products with iodine. So the fortification programs go into vitamin A, D, iodine, iron, and zinc. Specifically to answer the question about rice. So rice generally is enriched. So our rice sides do have a mix of different grains. We have rice in there, but we also have some little kind of pasta pieces, fazouli, I think it's called in some of them. And our rice is enriched because of course it strips the nutrients, then we put them back. And some of those nutrients are often, iron, niacin, thiamine, folic acid. So they are enriched. We don't particularly further fortify rice in general. And we really utilize things like our bouillon cubes and our seasonings as fortification carriers because they are eaten on more of kind of a daily basis, certainly in certain communities around the world.
Great, so it's so much food for thought, and definitely I know that Healthier and Sustainable Diets core team here at the CGF will be taking back some of these insights to see how we can bring them to market. So a huge thank you, Sophie, Dorothy and Paul, and we look forward to the follow-up. Thank you everyone for listening, and stay tuned for further action. Thank you.